So welcome everybody to session number 3 of our ongoing volunteer engagement training. This is number 3 of 6 sessions. So we're taking 25 minutes every month to build into our own lives, get some input, get some content, because we're all engaged in team building, and particularly team building at Crossroads. So Rod Kaya could not be with us today. He's been doing the brunt of the training, and he'll be re-engaged. But I asked Ryan if he would do this one. So Ryan, we're going to turn it over to you, and you can introduce the topic and take it however you want. So thank you, Ryan, and for everybody for being here today.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for either listening to this later on or listening to it now, but more importantly, thanks for your leadership here at Crossroads. Thanks for your heart and desire to grow as a leader and to really create environments where people can flourish, giving their talents and their time to. So I'm going to throw a curveball at you, Dennis. I'm going to abandon what Rod was going to do today. And I put together, I was sitting here realizing, it's like, why am I, we're talking about leading teams. That's great. I have a little webinar that I did a long time ago on leading teams people love. And so it's just some really practical ways, if you're leading a team of people, to create an environment that this is a team people love to be on. No, we all have those experiences of having been on a team and sitting around the room going, what are we doing? Why am I here? What are we trying to accomplish? Because I do think the reality that leadership can be really challenging and can be difficult, and really, charismatic leaders have an advantage in that people are attracted to their personality, and so they'll put up with a lot of nonsense. But you take the average, those of us that are just kind of average in our charisma, we have to actually create systems and structures in our lives that promote an atmosphere that people really can't wait to be a part of what we're doing. I don't get to lead many volunteer teams anymore, but I will say this, I think there's something really special and powerful about volunteer teams in the life of a church. Because for me, everything is about that discipleship word. Everything is about helping people experience Jesus and to become more like Jesus. So whether it's a team of people that are putting coffee out, whether it's a team of people that are doing youth ministry, whatever it might be, to attach that activity into this deeper meaning, not just for the work that they're doing, but in an individual's own life, that they're being cared for while they're on that team, that they recognize their value, that they're giving opportunities to serve, is really powerful. And so we want to be a church, a team of teams. We want to be a space where people can find a place to give their talents in a way that fits their schedule. I'm a big believer that all of our teams should have varying levels of commitment, that a person that can make a commitment to participate once a month, there should be a space for that. When Wendy and I were in youth ministry, that was one of our highlights of a volunteer team. We had this group of people, 25, 30 volunteers that participated all at different varying levels. And what we basically said was, hey, will you just commit to what you commit to? So if you're a person who says, hey, I'll do every week in the youth service, that's great, but be there every week, right? And so we tried to be really clear about those things. And so the more we can create clarity, the more we can create a structure for our teams and invest in that leadership, the more people want to be a part of it. And during that season, it was pretty crazy. We were at that church for about 8 or 9 years, mostly involved with youth ministry. And it was crazy, the consistency of those people. Rarely did we see people leave that team. And I think as I look back and as I thought about what was kind of the secret sauce to that team, and I think a lot of it was these things that I want to go over today. And I kind of backfilled them into my life with language, right? There were things that we kind of did a little naturally or whatever, maybe through bad experiences, but then I realized, well, there's a lot of science out there about team building, and there's some really good language. So leading teams people love. Here's some steps that we can take to be a leader that people want to be on their team. So the first one is this: make sure that you, as the team leader, you work with your team to define a common purpose. a common purpose. And I can send these notes over to you, Dennis, and we can distribute these to everybody. But the single most important ingredient in a team that is successful is having a clear, common, and compelling task, right? They have to have a task. If your team doesn't know the task that they're trying to accomplish, they're just a group. It's not a team. Like teams have a function, right? We see sports teams, a baseball team is out there to win the game, right? That's what they're there to do, right? And so there's a symptomatic dysfunction inside of a team that doesn't have a common purpose, that everybody understands this is what we are here doing together. And that dysfunction is a lack of commitment, right? If people don't understand what we're here for, what we're all about, they're just, they just won't be committed, right? And so you want your team to have a passion and to be able to speak into what it is that they're there to do. And then they'll come to the table and they'll be able to say, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. They'll bring their ideas, they'll bring their creativity, they'll debate, right? And they'll commit then to decisions because they know this is what we're trying to accomplish. I think right now of our land team, that I sit in on every now and then. That land team, we had to actually reconstitute the volunteer land team, which most of the people on that team are volunteers, not because they weren't wonderful people, but because over the years, there had been a loss of what are we actually trying to accomplish? So the first thing we had to do was go back to the council and do this hard work of, can we reconstitute this team? And it starts with, does everybody on the team understand our number one goal? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? And it's amazing just getting that compelling purpose down, how that team has been able to move forward. And even last night, have a great conversation, lively debate and discussion. And we were always able to go back to, well, what are our one or two like priorities? What's the purpose of that? Ross, you're on that team. So that's kind of a great example of how when there's a common purpose, people can buy in, they can be a part of it. And when there's not, they're just, why would I come? You know, why would I come and be a part of it? So that's the first thing. The second thing is we have to communicate crystal clear roles, right? Crystal clear roles for our team members, right? So roles are about how we design, divide, and deploy the work of the team, right? So everybody sitting around that table, everybody that's a part of a team, they need to understand clearly their roles. I'm a big believer that every area of our church, every department, every ministry, every team should have clear job descriptions for people. They should get a piece of paper that says, here's what this team is all about. Here's what you've said. Hey, I want to do this. Here's what's expected of you. And here's how your work is contributing to the goal of what our team is doing as a whole. And here's the thing, if people don't know their roles, if they just show up and they're on this team and there's a common purpose, there's going to be an inattention to results, right? When there's a failure to hold people accountable, right, it just creates an environment where team members are going to put their own needs above the shared goals of everyone in the group, and they're not going to pay attention to the results of the team. So if I don't understand my role, how it relates to somebody else's role, you know, why does it matter if I'm on time? I can get my work done, but if I don't understand how it relates to somebody else, then I won't be committed, right? And so there's just this, you know, if I don't have an understanding of everybody's role, my part in it, then, you know, I'm just going to do my thing and I'm not going to worry about the whole team. So we want to make sure that on our teams, people understand this is your role, this is your job, this is how it relates to the purpose then, all right? So second thing is in this phrase is called, it says identify accepted leadership, right? Identify accepted leadership. So high performance teams, they need to have clear, competent leadership, right? So you got to have somebody who everybody recognize this is a person that can lead us. This is the person who's in charge. We accept that. This is a person who demonstrates consistency in their leadership, who understands the struggles that I'm going through, who understands the way I function and work, and they can lead me as an individual. So there has to be this person. Now, when there isn't a leader, right, the dysfunction that comes into a team is a real lack of accountability. And this is the fun part in church world when you're dealing with volunteers, because I just have this belief that volunteers should be held accountable to what they commit to, and not in a negative way, But sometimes we drag people on into it along in a team that have a responsibility. They don't fulfill that responsibility they commit to, and the leader isn't actually holding them accountable to that. So everybody has to be committed to this clear plan, but then somebody has to be holding people accountable in a loving, healthy way. You know where this gets played out all the time is in children's ministry, when you ask people to be in their room ready to go 15 minutes before service starts, right? Like we've all been guilty of like, yeah, I'll volunteer, I'll do it. And then we roll in and like the kids are there waiting for us, right? Parents are waiting to check in, right? And so, but what happens is we just kind of dance around instead of coming back and saying, hey, we had this conversation early on that to be this role meant being here 15 minutes early. And if you can't do that, that's okay. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to make you feel bad. Your life circumstances may be that it's just too difficult, but we actually have to figure out a different place to serve because this is important, right? And so there's that way to hold people accountable that's loving and gracious, but you can't hold people accountable if they don't know their roles, right? If they haven't accepted it, if they haven't thought about it, right? And then they don't know who they're accountable to, all right? So we've said, define the common purpose, create clear roles, identify the accepted leadership, and then create and follow effective processes, right? So a team is going to map out, identify the key processes that they have to do to get the work done. So for a team that could be any kind of, so let's talk about a process of follow-up at a church, right? So let's suggest that a healthy church has a team of people that are doing follow-up for guests that are there for the first time or second time. Does everybody understand the process that everybody gets a contact email within 24 hours of filling out that Connect card? Are they getting a handwritten note card within 36 hours of filling out that note card, filling that out? If somebody puts a prayer request in and I'm on the prayer team, do we understand the effective process is to make sure that that prayer request gets into the right hands and that the person who actually filled out the prayer request gets a personal touch point within 72 hours to know that we actually prayed for you, not a form letter, but an actual note that says, hey, I saw that you put on there that right now you're struggling in your marriage. I just want you to know I prayed for you this week. And if you need a care minister, here's the link to fill out a form, and a care minister would love to walk with you through this very difficult time. So do we understand and have we created as a team those processes that are important to get us where we need to go? And some of those processes are, how are we going to communicate to one another? Are we going to use email? Are we going to call one another? Where should people be looking for those? So understanding, identifying those, and it can seem like really silly work at times, but you have to identify these things in a sense. Like, what are those processes going to be? And looking at it and saying, okay, what do we have to do? And what happens over and over again? Like, that's the trick when you're talking about systems, right? Like, things that happen regularly should happen really without a whole lot of thought. That's kind of, I'm a big like automate, like what's like make automatic what should be that way. You know, it's amazing how many churches that I've done consulting work with that they're like surprised that they have a guest. It's like, they're like, what do we do this week? And they have a different process every Sunday for a guest that shows up, right? Or there's somebody, this is a classic one in a lot of churches, is somebody needs money. Right? You can't start a church and lead a church and not expect that there's somebody's going to come and need money. And some of those people are not going to go to your church, and some of those people are going to go to your church. Well, do you have a process, a system, a team of people that understands how to navigate those requests? Because every time a request comes in, most churches are like, what do we do? Who should we talk to about this? Do we have any money? Right? And it's really about 4 steps to make sure that, you know, oh, well, here's how we do that, right? So understanding those processes, right? And that's, I think, things like hope builders and these projects that get taken on, like how people apply for that is a great example of just having good systems and processes in place in our church. Another thing that I think is super important in creating a team that people love is to really think about relationships and to cultivate real solid relationships within that team. Looking for and creating a team with diverse perspectives, right? Our church, the more diverse our teams are, the bigger the advantage we're going to have in accomplishing our mission, because people will see themselves, will get a perspective. Hey, there's an event that an outreach team is getting ready to do. If you don't have a person on that outreach team, let's say who comes from a Spanish speaking heritage, for example, we might do an outreach that not just simply, doesn't include, but actually could drive away a group of people, because we just don't know. So cultivating those good relationships, and this I think is really key when it comes to volunteers in the life of church. This is what I've learned, is that most people don't volunteer because they need something to do with their life. Like most people aren't sitting around going, man, I am just so bored. Why don't I volunteer? I think people volunteer because they have a sense of purpose. They want a sense of calling. They want to be a part of something bigger. But I also think people volunteer because they want relationships. They want to be loved. They want to get ministered to. So for me, I think one of the most important things our leaders can do is recognize a big part of the role of leading a team is to create regular opportunities for that team to be together, not doing work, to just have fun. And those people that know one another and have fun together, man, they will go further in their work. And I think what happens is there's like a common interest that can glue those people together. Say it's youth ministry, or being an usher, or being on a benevolence team, or being on a global outreach team, right? There's a glue, there's a common passion there. And then what happens is if we create an ecosystem where we're ministering to one another, like we're loving each other, we're helping one another move, we're creating meal plans when somebody's sick, right? We're listening to we create that space for what we'll call it Christian community within the life of a team. That just creates a cement with that team, because now it's not like, oh, well, I'm here to just, I'm here to greet people at the door. No, like these people that greet at the doors, they're my people, right? They're my people. They know me. And that, I think, is what is so beautiful about volunteering in the life of a church, is it creates this space, if it's done well, where people have kind of the Cheers experience, right? I'm at a big church, but I have this place where everybody knows me. I have this space where I have a voice. I have this space where I know, like, I can shoot an email out that I'm not feeling well, and people will check in on me or pray for me or whatever it might be. And here's the thing about this, like, this takes time, and this is leadership. Like, I think this is probably one of the most important things that team leaders need to do, but it's also one that easily gets thrown by the wayside because we're so busy with whatever the task is that we're doing. But we don't recognize that monthly kind of meal in our home, where people have access to us as team leaders, where there's no agenda, or maybe there is an agenda. It's getting together to talk about the ministry, but there's this huge component of fun, of being together. When we don't do that, all of a sudden we just have cogs in a wheel, right? And then it's just people are there simply to accomplish some task. And I think that's what makes a church team environment quite unique, is that the task of every team, regardless of what it is to minister to one another. Like, that's one of the components. And so that takes real effort and energy. And then the last one is excellent communication. Excellent communication. So every team, if you want to have a team that people want to be on, fast, clear, accurate communication. If people are wondering what's going on, when am I supposed to be there, what's expected of me, forget it. They're out, because then they just feel bad. They feel like they disappointed, I didn't meet the standard. So always over communicating is just wildly important. And everybody agreeing on how that's going to be done. This gets into like the systems and processes, but it's very specific around communication. So does everybody know, oh, we're going to use a Facebook group, or we're going to use CCB. Here's how that's Church Community Builder. That's our tool in the life of our church. This is how we're going to communicate. Does everybody know? Let's train people on it, right? And then people get into this really great rhythm of, they know they can expect, I'm going to get a weekly email on Thursday from my team, just reminding me of when I'm serving in this area. If I'm in children's ministry, am I getting my curriculum? How am I going to get that communicated to me? And then it has to be consistent and accurate all the time. All right. So those are some things that really create an ecosystem and a team that people love to be on. It's hard work, right? It really is. And so those were, again, defining that common purpose, defining the crystal clear roles, identifying who is the accepted leader of the team, creating and following those processes, cultivating relationships with one another, and then really excellent communication. And those are the hallmarks. A lot of these come from a great book called The Performance Factor, written by a guy named John McMillan, or McMillan's his last name. It's not, his first name isn't John, sorry. But they go really into deep details. And I think there's a nuance to dealing with volunteer teams, you know, on some of this, like the accepted leadership, like that's, you know, that's going to be pretty clear. You're not bringing in people from multiple departments to accomplish a task, and we need to figure out who the leader is, you know. But do they accept you as the leader? That's a great question, right? Do they recognize me as a leader? Am I actually doing the things that have to be done in that sense? So yes, okay. So I don't know if I spoke too long there or not, Dennis. Well, you're muted.
No, thank you, Ryan. That's great input, very helpful. We have 2 minutes. So who has a question for Ryan? Like, how do you do this, or where have you seen a good example of this? Anybody have a question?
Not so much a question as a comment in general. I like the structure. I like the identification of various key factors that make the whole thing work. And I recognize in my own self how some of those things work for me and some of those things just don't work for me. And a lot of it is my own choices. Clear communication. Okay, I could do a lot better there. Creating goals and roles for everybody. And that's a little more difficult because of the nature of what I do. I have tasks that show up. But, you know, when I'm doing, so I get stuff thrown at me all the time, and I usually just take it on. So I'm ending up taking more on to myself and not delegating as well as I could. So it's more of an identification of places where I could improve.
Yeah. And so Carl, I think you bring up a great point in that, like, this is the transition from like doing to leading, right? And that's a tough one, right? Like what makes a person a great doer does not make them a great leader. And I don't think everybody is a leader. And I'm not saying you're not a leader, Carl. I just think you bring up a really good point for us to understand that sometimes, like, it's that phrase, what got you here won't get you there. Right. So like anytime a person gets promoted in an organization or gets promoted in a church, like when I sit down with them, I always say, I just had this conversation with somebody just last week. I said, you got to understand, what made you a great X will not make you a great leader of X. It just won't work, because your ability to focus, your ability to get into that task, your ability to problem solve, those are good things, but leadership is very, very different. And so like what you described is like, hey, you can get a project done and go for it, and you can invite some people to come alongside with you. That's a beautiful model to get things done. The question becomes, okay, when does that have to transition into, well, now I've got 7 projects that are going, and I actually have to invest my energy not in doing the projects, but in creating a team that gets the projects done. Right. And then all of a sudden there's like soul searching, like, do I even want to do that? Or do I want to be a person who gets one of the projects done? And how do we as leaders say, that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with not wanting to lead a team or anything like that. I want to get in there and get it done. You know, I'm like, the last thing you want me doing is picking up a saw. You want me organizing the people picking up the saw.
Great. Thank you. Super content. Thank you, Ryan. We'll continue this in next month. Let's see, it'll be June. And then we'll let you continue on with this whole investment. Again, like what Ryan said, we're always working at these things. You know, it's something that you go, okay, we're doing pretty well on those 2, but those couple, like Carl said, we could get better on that. And every team that we're on, I think we could take these 6 things and sort of hold it up and go, okay, we're doing pretty well with those two things. We need to do this. Like on our Hope Builders team, we just did number one. We defined our common purpose. We took, how long did we take to do that, Carl? Parts of 2 meetings. Just
Yeah.
you come up with a statement of this is who we are and this is the task and this is what we're doing. And so now we have clarity around it. And sometimes our teams are handed the kind of the vision statement, but sometimes the one you're handed isn't the one you own. So sometimes you have to revisit number one so that everybody gets a little input. I've learned this, people don't always have to have their way, but they love to have their say. And so giving people an opportunity to have input. Anyway, we could go on, but our time is over, and thank you for taking the time to do this. Ryan, thanks again. I'll send Ryan, if you'll send me the notes, I probably actually have them. And then I'll send it out with a link to the video for doing this. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate
Thank
your time.
you.
Really, thank you.
All right.